You're listening to Cinema Rex. That's right, it's an Iranian film podcast, episode 42, Ebrahim Golestan's Brick and Mirror. Good morning, Farhan. We are doing another recording straight out of your lavish, plant-filled living room apartment building down at... No, we won't. I'll bleep out your address. It's okay. We don't want those death threats that are going through Instagram coming by mail.
Yeah. Someone sends a courier.
Hey, speaking of death threats, I want to make something clear right off the top.
Yeah.
It's just like a public service announcement to all our listeners out there. We are not an academic film podcast. We are not out there doing a truth social freedom convoy, whatever. We are not changing lives or harming people. We will from time to time get something wrong. It takes an immense amount of mental courage or aptitude to go out there and express your thoughts on opinions on something, specifically art, and have it there on the record permanently for years and years. And because we are two podcast co-hosts who will do this, our opinions are subject to change. We are not beholden to opinions we've had on something about a film 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 months ago, rather, or a year ago. And we don't claim to be academic experts. I will at times refer to some of the academic experts that we've listened to in the past. Farhan might do that too. We'll read from journalistic pieces, articles written by people who know their field better. But if we do get something wrong, you can be gentle about it to Farhan and not get upset, or myself. With that being said, keep in mind that we are just a podcast where we're two people who work in film.
There's been like the odd time where like I've seen someone like on Instagram like say something really aggressive in like their first comment, and then I'll like respond with something like gentle, and then their tune immediately switches. And like, oh, wait, this is like a real person that I'm talking to. So.
Right. Anyways, like one thing that really I can't let go of is in our very first ever episode, I asked, why is it called Where is the Friend's House? And we failed to mention that it was a reference to Sohrab Seperi's poem. And so we got flooded messages like saying like, oh, and I remember like people probably thought these guys don't know what they're talking about. But first of all, it's our inaugural podcast. We're both pretty nervous. But at the same time, my question wasn't what is it a reference to? I was speaking about the grammatical choice of calling it that. And even if in the poem it is a grammatical choice, I'm still wondering why the translation literally brings it to Where is the Friend's House. But we are going to miss things. We are going to forget things. We might even get some things wrong.
Also, I just want to add to that really quick. A lot of the people who were pointing this out to us were non-Iranians who were like cinephiles and like Abbas Kiarostami fans and all this stuff. I later found out, talking to much older Iranians who are fans of like poetry and Iranian culture and stuff, that proverb of where's the friend's house even predates this poem. It's an old Sufi proverb, which it's a call and response thing, which you'll be like you'll pair it with something that is nice or something that is like wholesome or feels like home. You know what I mean? So like, This isn't a real one. I'm just like throwing something out there, but like, that first cup of chai in the morning, that's the friend's house or whatever. Yeah. Like it's like an old proverb.
Yeah. Where is the friend's house? Making out with the hottest stripper on a Friday night.
That's the friend's house.
With that being said, Dur bar shoma dostan aziz. This is the Cinerex podcast where we talk all things Iranian film, cinema, black and white, noir, cityscapes, bricks, mirrors. What else do we talk about?
Taxi drivers.
The
cookies that we just microwaved.
Microwavable cookies. I'm Kaveh Mohebi.
And I'm Farhan Moradi.
Anyways, that's what the rant I had to start with because it's been on my mind. You apparently, notably, you want to remark on the thing you might have gotten wrong recently?
I don't really care.
Nor should you.
I'll get like messages from people that are like, this is wrong. This part was wrong here. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I can be wrong. I'm not an expert on these topics.
We're just two people who like the sound of our own voices wanting to record ourselves talk about film. We're not out there preaching to some academic program. These are just our opinions, and we have to allow space to be wrong.
The whole reason that we started this podcast is because there was no podcast out there on Iranian cinema in English. because Kaveh was trying to find a podcast to listen to recommend him Iranian movies. So that's all we're really trying to do is like watch Iranian movies, say whether or not we like them, what we liked about them, and then put it out there.
I'll even go one step further and say the only reason this podcast exists in my mind is it forces me to watch more Iranian movies or revisit Iranian movies. And if I didn't have this podcast, much like you, I probably wouldn't be compelled to watch 1 or 2 Iranian movies a week or every 2 weeks, because I wouldn't just make space in my life to do that. This forces me to, and I'm happy that I have this thing that I'm disciplined towards doing because I want to experience more Iranian cinema. Mm-hmm. I'm an Iranian cinephile who is also a professional writer, so I want a reason to be constantly going to films, watching Iranian films, celebrating them. And then the podcast is just an extra thing. Since I've watched all these movies, I might as well find a friend who wants to share in the discussions with us, with me.
That is the friend's house.
Yeah, that is the friend's house. And speaking of that, I am at my friend's house. Farhan, this is at your house. We're doing our 3rd ever episode in person because you claim it's better because you don't have to be stuck on the 401. Okay, so today, shall we talk about what we're doing? We watched Ebrahim Golestan's 1964. It says 1964. IMDb has it as 1966. Largely influential, important film, Brick and Mirror.
Kheshto Ayne.
Now, some books have this, and I've heard this referred to by other people. It's also referred to as Mud, Brick, and Mirror. Have you found that anywhere?
Oh, I have not.
Every academic book I had on it, I literally called it, like several different books by different authors, called it Mud, Brick, and Mirror. Everything online says Brick and Mirror.
I wonder, now I have no idea, so if I'm wrong, feel free to let us know if I'm wrong. But my suspicion is that this is some European translator trying to be like, they don't have real bricks. They have mud bricks.
As opposed to clay bricks?
I don't know. As opposed to like masonry.
I know Mertosh calls it that too in English.
Mud, brick, and mirror?
Yeah. Because I remember when he first called it that, I was like, oh, I haven't seen that movie. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Do you mean Brick and Mirror? The first time I'd heard it was, but he could be hearing a European translation too. I mean, it's more likely.
Oh, wait. There's different words for brick in Persian. So that could be why.
Is khesht mud brick versus?
They both just say brick. There's like a couple different words for it, but
yeah. Well, we'll get to the reason of the title. I do have the reference here for the poetic reference of why it's called that, but we'll get there later. I'm going to jump into a plot summary. Bow, 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 bow.
Do it.
Brick and Mirror follows a young taxi driver after a female passenger abandons her baby in his cab. What to do with the child becomes a source of concern and contention among his social circle as the night's journey takes him from police station to orphanage and back home, where his awaiting girlfriend is aspiring to marry him and keep the child as their own. We'll leave the plot summary there. It has no Rotten Tomato score because the film wasn't popular enough to get one, and no audience score. So Farhan, I ask you, just kidding. I'm going to go first this time because there's a few things I want to say off the top of this film. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
What's important to know off the top of this, if you've heard the premise right now they just set up, is this film is almost like an episodic structure of autonomous set pieces of varying quality. They're like little vignettes, right? This guy has a baby in the back of his cab. First, he goes to have dinner with his friends carrying this baby. Then he goes to the police station. Then he goes to, before that, he meets a woman where he thinks that the lady had run off, and that homeless woman is talking about. These are just like scenes, like little vignette scenes of like people musing about the state of Iran as he carries the baby around. One woman talks about agriculture. The police officer talks about the state of crime. His friends they muse about, they're sort of like the illiterate, sort of like snobby sophisticates talking about subject, philosophy and stuff. I think this film is important. I think it's very powerful in its pantheon of films. I think it's an utterly frustrating movie.
Yeah.
And I want to say for the record, this is my second time watching the film. The first time I'd watched the film was a really bad like VHS rip on YouTube. And all I had was like this not great quality too of the audio. Yeah. And I watched the entire thing. And I was like, I hate this movie. I absolutely hate everything. I hate the characters. You made it through. I hate the visuals, everything. I just couldn't make sense of what was happening on screen.
Remember when we tried to do that for The Deer? And The Deer is a good movie, and we couldn't get very far.
But this version, I will say, because we got a better, it's been restored by a European company. I think it's one of the same ones that did the last film, Chess of the Wind. It was one of the Bologna, Italian.
The Cineteca di Bologna.
And I have to say, visually, I thought it's actually very beautiful once I saw this 4K restoration of it.
Yeah.
I think cinematography of it is wonderful. I think it's a beautiful black and white noir film that captures like the busy city streets of Tehran. And we'll talk about all the detail there. I still feel largely the same about the writing. And I have a theory as to why I feel that way, unless you have it in behind the scenes and trivia. But it's a beautiful and important movie. It's just like, I don't like the writing of it that much, to the point where I wonder how often it's actually sliding towards parody and satire. And it's worth discussing how much of the things I don't like about it were deliberate by the filmmaker.
That's interesting. I didn't feel... It felt very sincere to me.
Well, I read some reviews that I think that deliberately said it's parody of these type of people. And I was like, if that's the case, then it changes my opinion. Because I think some of these scenes go on for so long of characters just musing about the state of Iran or philosophy, or like, here's a name drop for a book I've read. Here's a Dostoevsky reference. Here's this. Especially early on, the dinner table scene.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is, I can see the writing in this scene. I can see the writer behind me like, oh, these are impressive. This is the thing I want to talk about in the state of the world. And it doesn't come in organically. It doesn't come diegetically. It's not relevant to the plot. That character who talks about Dostoevsky, we never see again. He's a friend at a bar. And it's so early in the film
was that Parviz Fanizadeh, by the way?
I thought it was.
I'm pretty sure because he's in the credits and it kind of looks like him.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Yeah.
Parviz Fanizadeh is the lead from Downpour.
I think the choice to make that really early on is a mistake, because what I will say to the film's credit is once the film becomes about the relationship, it becomes way more interesting. The stuff they're saying about this state of relationships, marriage, a role of a man, a role of a woman, the role of a family in Iran, it's now diegetic. It is purposeful to the characters. It's advancing the story forward and interesting. But that doesn't come until like the midpoint towards second half of the film.
Yeah.
Everything about our two leads, Taji, who's the girlfriend.
Yeah.
And Hashemi?
Hisham, I think.
Hashem, which is their names are lifted right from the actors' names.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It is.
Hashemi, because Hashem is like the cab driver who finds the baby. Taji is his girlfriend. And what to do with this child becomes the backbone of the plot. But before that, there are so many long vignettes of him hanging out with friends, hanging out with this unhoused woman he's trying to find the woman, and like this unhoused woman's like talking about. And I was like, why start so early with these long philosophical rants?
I mean, I think overall, the entire movie has the same problem in that every single scene is way too long. Every scene is pretty circular in a lot of ways with the dialogue. Like, you think that a problem gets solved, and then someone's like, and another thing, and then it just keeps going, and it happens repeatedly. Even in the scenes that happen with the boyfriend and girlfriend throughout the rest of the movie, even those scenes go on too long.
Yeah,
that's my main issue with this movie. I also find that in general, the movie's just clunky, like which makes sense. This is only the second feature-length film of the Iranian New Wave movement.
Yeah.
Right? And before this was made, there wasn't one before it.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't think Night of the Hunchback was out yet. He might have seen it, maybe. Maybe he, like, saw a cut of it. But I'm pretty sure when he was making this movie, I don't think Night of the Hunchback had been publicly released yet. Some might call this, like, this period of filmmaking a like precursor to the Iranian New Wave movement.
The spark that lighted the New Wave.
But in essence, this is like the origins of it. And so because of that, you'll have scenes where like the 180 rule, which is if you're on, for example, the left side of an actor's face, if the camera is viewing the actor from the left side of their face, when you flip around to the other person that they're talking to, you have to be over their right side of their face. And the reason for that is when you're watching the shots back to back in a scene, you need one character to be looking left and one to be looking right, so that when you're cutting between the shots, it looks like they're looking at each other. The problem is this movie in many scenes is like, that's completely out the window. So as you're watching it, you're like, who are they talking to? Like, What are they staring at a wall? Like, what is going on?
Right.
And you can like kind of get around it eventually, but then the movie falls back into a groove of being shot well. And then the next scene is super clunky. And then again, it throws you out of it. And then the scene's too long. So you're like, I'm disoriented. This is going on for a long time. We already have the information we need from the scene. Can we move on?
Yeah, the long scenes. And see, this is one of the things, one of the readings I heard, because here's a behind the scenes thing I'll mention. I don't know if there's a thing you're going to mention. It's worth mentioning now.
Yeah.
So he very famously, and said this multiple times when he was doing Q&As on the film, is the script was the least of his concerns. He was on every project he did. Most of the time, he was director, writer, producer, editor, sometimes cameraman. In this film, he's the narrator multiple times. So it's like he really was like taking command of everything. And he would almost disregard the script to the point of writing the scenes the night before and just relying on improvisation. Specifically for this film a lot too. So the script was kind of a loose scene about like, why don't you talk about musings? Why did in this scene we'll have the doctor talk about how he was robbed and he let the actors go. So a lot of these scenes were led by improvisation.
Right.
And to its credit, like it has an interesting effect for its time, but to another thing, it's like, man, like you have an over 2 hour runtime and you don't even get to like the meat of the story until like 40 minutes into the film.
Yeah. Like I think there's a very compelling short film in here.
There's a more compelling, I think it's a compelling feature as it is. Because it's such a outlier to what narrative storytelling should be, especially in Iran at the time.
Yeah.
We'll get to it, but like there's a 9-minute uninterrupted scene of babies in an orphanage with no dialogue. Yeah. It's veering on documentary at this point. Because you just know those babies are actual babies in an orphanage too.
Yeah. It made me think of The House is Black.
Exactly. The House of Black feelings. So it's like at one point in the middle of the story is just pausing for 8 minutes to give you the silent, wordless documentary about orphanages in Iran. Like a photo docujournalism or something, you know?
You know there's no like conversational dialogue with any of the main characters from that point to the end of the film?
Yeah.
There's one bit of dialogue, which is, I'm pretty sure it's Golestan's voice.
The news
thing.
Yeah.
It's not his face. It's the face of the civics servant from earlier in the film, but it's Golestan's voice.
Yeah.
And then there's another woman with a baby who goes to get in a taxi that he observes.
Yeah.
She's like calling
Golestan's voice is also the narrator at the beginning on the radio.
Yeah.
The very first. So it's the first voice and last voice you hear.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's a frustrating film, because I think it's actually doing some really interesting things, but it's veering on experimental at times. And being the writer, I just wish that he had put a little bit more care into what the scenes were about and what the characters were saying, rather than like, let's have a loose discussion on existentialism or whatever in this scene.
You know that like this was a bigger thing in the 90s when like men would be threatened by their partners making more money than them. I wonder if this is a thing where he's like threatened by how Farouk is a better filmmaker than him. He's like, wait, I have to like take parts of what she did, make like this, make it longer, 1 hour, no, 2 hours long.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too. Like Golestan was an accomplished novelist and storyteller, like a published writer in his own right, and a poet in his own right too.
Yeah.
But you know, as a filmmaker, he started this school. I'll get into behind the scenes. I've talked about it before in past podcasts. But it's also very clear that this is about him and Farouk. Like that woman, Taji, who plays the girlfriend, like kind of looks like her too.
Yeah, she does.
She looks like her. They have a romance going on that seems almost forbidden. And like, he's so worried. I know it's because of the time too, but he's so worried about the neighborhood. Eyes are on them. You have to stay in my apartment. You can't let people see you come in and out of my apartment. Stay here. She wants to be with him, and he talks about how it's impossible for them to be together.
But why is it impossible? Does he ever clarify?
They don't. But it's almost like, it's almost implied, like, is she like the other woman and he's like married or something? Like, is this, you know what I mean? Like, it's
not, because the civic servant is like, you're single, you have a good job, you're like doing well.
Yeah, but
he's like, why would you tie yourself down with a baby? I can't let you have this kid.
I'm not saying,
but you should get married.
I'm not saying he was, but it has the air of that.
Yeah.
Their relationship is almost like she's the other woman. The way he talks about it.
I mean, they do mention at one point that they both cheated on each other.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's just like, oh no, people will talk and it's going to be like frowned upon that we're like marrying cheaters.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, yeah, well, you both cheated. Whatever.
Well, and that's why
maybe you belong together.
and that's why it has such strong Furuk vibes. As someone who's probably listening has like just say the thing that everybody knows is that it's like heavily implied or suggested or realized, whether or not through fact or whatever, that Golestan and Furuk had a relationship together, an extramarital relationship, as Golestan was married.
Yeah,
that's heavily implied throughout the letters and stuff they wrote to each other. In terms of the vignettes, there's like 4 or 5 main vignettes. Tell me if I missed any of them. He stops to find the woman who abandoned the baby, and he meets an old woman in the streets.
And by the way, that opening sequence reminded me a lot of Taxi Driver.
Yeah, I like that actually opening sequence. I like the way it was shot. He's going through this like abandoned building that's like derelict and destroyed, and like the staircases are all
No, before that, when he's driving.
Oh, when he's literally driving.
Yeah, when he's just driving, it's like there's like a montage
it's
thing of him driving around the city.
Yeah.
And it's like very noir-esque, and it feels very much like Taxi Driver.
Yeah. This is your first time seeing the film, right?
Yeah.
I remember reading the premise the first time I read it. I'm like, oh, this should be a really good movie. That's an interesting premise. Like this
premise is interesting.
It's really good. You know, it just falls a little bit short. But after he searches for the woman, also I kind of described it. It felt like an MC Escher painting because he's like going up the stairs one way, and then it's like another angle. He's going up the stairs the other way, and it's like this weird labyrinth of an abandoned building. And the homeless woman, the unhoused woman, is talking about how this used to be a beautiful field. Then they sold the field and they've destroyed it and just put cement, and they're building these buildings, and it's been abandoned and all this stuff. So this woman's talking about the state of Iran. And he goes to his friends with the dinner, and he's having dinner with the friends explaining that he has this baby on him, which I just the whole time felt so bad for the baby because they were smoking so many cigarettes around the baby and just put the baby on the dining table and all these cigarettes.
So much smoke in that
2025
cabaret or whatever.
2025 Kaveh with an 11-month-old is just like cringing at this. By the way, 2025 Kaveh with an 11-month-old had just about up to here with a baby crying throughout the movie. Because I literally at one point played it for Mariam. I'm like, listen to what I'm listening to right now. And she's like, oh my God, because I literally been hearing that all day with Tiam. They're like, now to sit down and watch a movie.
Yeah. Including times where like the camera's like on the baby and the baby's like clearly laughing. And the sound is like, wah.
Then there was, so there's a scene where he's bemusing with his intellectual friends. Then he goes to the police station where a doctor's been robbed because someone had called in a doctor appointment. He said, someone called saying their woman's in labor.
Yeah.
I went there and the woman's husband and whatever brother robbed me and robbed me of all my stuff. And then he adds the fact that there was a miscarriage 2 weeks ago with that woman.
Yeah.
I failed. I didn't fail.
I want to make like little comps really quickly about some of these vignettes.
Yeah.
Because each of these vignettes is like tonally very different. The first vignette feels very much like Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
The second vignette feels very much like White Meadows or like Stranger in the Fog. It almost feels like mystic or horror-esque. The third vignette feels a lot like a lot of the scenes in Casablanca where they're like, you're seeing the people in the bar hanging out. The fourth vignette, what would you think is like a good comp, like tonally?
For which one?
The one with the doctor.
Well, hold on. I thought the first one was like a bit of a fever dream. I wrote it like
Taxi Driver?
Yeah, it's like fever, like especially when he gets there with the woman.
That's the second one.
Yeah, the first one just like setting I feel like the credits are still rolling.
So this the one with the woman that I was like feels kind of like White Meadows or like
that one feels like the third one I felt like was Reservoir Dogs. The opening scene, they're all sitting around the dining table talking, like smoking cigarettes.
That's better than Casablanca.
The doctor scene almost feels like Kafka-esque. I almost had that for the Ministry of Justice too. When they get there, it's like this Kafka kind of like thing of like authority and the failure of like sort of any sort of systems that are supposed to be there.
That one even feels a little like Night of the Hunchback.
Yeah. The cops are not really willing to do anything. But there's this recurring motif of like dead children, babies that have been either stillborn.
Yeah.
Mostly stillborn. I think some of them are miscarriages and stuff. The doctor says that he'd failed to do that. And I want to talk about that later on in deeper analysis because
pregnant women were probably going to that cabaret with all the smoke.
Yeah.
Probably counts for at least 50%.
And it's interesting at that dining table scene with his friends, there's a whole thing of like, don't go to the cops. This is obviously a trap. The woman's going to claim that you robbed them and robbed the baby. Yeah. You know, and like they're like, it's like, no, you know what you have to do is you have to get in another taxi and abandon the baby in that taxi and get out of there. And it's someone else's problem. Yeah, and it's all this whole thing of like, can we trust people in society? This is a trap. Like it's all this like failure to like be able to like rely on one another.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of commentary on what Golestan is saying about the state of Iran at the time, at least for himself.
Yeah. Which, you know what? Like I almost would have liked to have seen if all of these vignettes and scenes were shorter to see him actually trying to do some of these things that were suggested.
Yeah.
Instead of everything being suggested in the one scene, it's like he does a thing, meets up with his friends. He's like, that didn't work. Like, all right, well, why don't you try this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like the writer was like, yeah, if this happened, then this would happen. It's like, great, show that to me.
Yeah. And that's the problem with that is like the scene with the dying is so long that it starts distracting from the main plot of this guy with the baby.
Yeah.
And it happens too early in the film, in my mind, to like have us invested.
Yeah.
Like this could be, sure, if you want to indulge in a longer sort of intellectual bourgeois scene of these bourgeois elites hanging out at a bar, maybe do it like halfway through your film, not like the second main scene of the film.
Yeah, it might have also broken up the pacing a little bit.
It just comes off right from the beginning, pretty self-indulgent.
Yeah. But again, in a lot of ways, this is like the second movie in like a whole new direction of Iranian cinema. So like Kaveh and I have this in mind, I assume, right, Kaveh?
Yeah.
When we're like making these criticisms, but I think it's still fair to make these criticisms.
Look, and I have to say, I'm torn on how I feel about the film because I didn't hate it. I just find it fascinating and a little bit frustrating to sink your teeth into. And I also think there's something to be said about he did it through his own studio where he played every role. So if nothing else, it is a singular image of a film. It's the film he wanted to make, which you have to give credit to that. It's not a film that felt compromised. It didn't feel like a film that was being held to censorship. It wasn't a film that was being done as a mandate for a government propaganda piece. This is a singular vision by a filmmaker who like, this is the exact story I want to tell. And that should be celebrated too. Because whatever it is, it's exactly what he wanted it to be. He's editor, writer, producer, director, cinematographer at times for the most part. He did have a cinematographer too, but he shot a lot of it himself as well. Like he was like a camera operator and he's the narrator. Like, so there's a lot of autonomy there and you got to celebrate that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Was Farouk alive when he made this movie?
Yes. I think she still was.
Did she work on the film?
Oh, sorry. She's in the film.
She is?
Yeah.
Who'd she play?
She's the woman who leaves the baby in the cab.
Oh.
She's completely wearing a black. You won't know it unless you read about it.
That's cool.
She's she's covered in a black veil. You never really see her you hear her voice, which actually she's the first speaking role in the entire film.
That's cool. I wonder if she's also the voice of the last lady.
Oh, interesting. The very last one that calls a taxi?
Yeah.
Possible. But
because that line is 80 yards.
But it's just interesting that Farouk Farrokhzad is the character who sets this whole thing in motion.
Yeah.
Like, literally is the woman that leaves the baby.
Yeah.
So then, I had this question too so after the doctor's talking about how he feels he didn't fail this woman who had a stillborn baby. The baby was going to die anyways, but he thinks that's why he's been robbed because this family wants to take their revenge on him. And he's telling the cops, why won't you do anything about it? And the cops like, that's life, man. Sometimes things happen to you. Sometimes they don't. You just got to roll with it. He's like, what are you talking about? Roll with it. Like, I just got my ass handed. I have to get used to getting beaten up. Like, all of this is a commentary on Golestan of like modern society in Iran.
Yeah.
The cops are in net. And that's why I think this is why the theory might be worth debating. Is that scene with those guys being pretentious in a bar deliberately boring and drawn out and self-indulgent? Is this a criticism of bourgeois people sitting there with their bourgeois problems, not really doing anything, not actually causing the help?
Maybe. I mean, it felt like those guys. I don't think that was parody because another character like calls them out on it in the moment.
Well, the woman calls him out on it.
Yeah.
But that's why, that would be kind of the point. Would be like.
I think it's like not subtext or like parody. I'm saying like that is the point. Like what you're saying, I think is the intended point.
But the fact that the scene actually feels long and drawn out and boring would then be the parody.
I don't think that is
because the woman calls him out.
Thing.
There's also a potential thing to be said about that character being gay.
Yeah,
because the woman calls him like his sissy ways.
Yeah,
he speaks a little bit.
He's like definitely playing it very effeminate.
He speaks effeminately, and everything, his mannerisms seem to be, anyways, like it just seems but it's not commented on beyond the comment that the woman makes.
And if that is Parviz Fanizadeh, which I'm pretty sure it is, like he's putting on a voice. He's
exactly.
He's acting like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and she says to him, she's like, "Oh, you're talking a bunch of garbage," and they're like, "He's studied abroad. He's an intellectual. He's like one of our smartest minds, whatever." And she's like,
"Wait," he says, "You should be so lucky I've lowered myself here to hang out with you guys."
Yeah.
And then
she's like, she said something along the lines of like, "We don't need you like sissy intellectuals right now. We need actual men to
Men of
stand
action
up.
and stuff like that.
Men of action to actually stand up and like make a difference.
And he's like, don't you read the paper? And he's like, my biggest problem is the paper comes out too early in the morning, and by the time I wake up in the afternoon, all the papers have been taken or something like that.
Right, yeah.
He says something like that. So it's just like,
or it's not news anymore.
It's not news anymore, yeah. But that's the commentary. I feel like these intellectuals are just sitting around talking about stuff rather. Actually, as I'm saying it out loud, I'm kind of liking this scene now because
it's just too long.
I know, but I'm
the point? Fine with the content.
I just think it's
too
good
long
for a film, but like as an experimental thing, that's the birth of new wave.
Sure,
it's an interesting device. Then you finally meet Taji. Taji's his girlfriend.
Yeah, he's
updated her about this baby, and she's down to help him out. Like, should we take him to my house? Should we take him to your house? This and this, and. You know, after he starts like running ahead of her and she's trying to catch up with the baby in her hand, she gets sick and she vomits or almost vomits. Do you remember in the streets?
Oh, yeah.
And he helps her clean her mouth, which was my first note being like, is she pregnant?
Yeah, I thought about that too. But, okay, I also thought for a second she was like contemplating killing the child and like putting it out of its misery.
No.
That's what I thought, like, because of the way it was shot. Because she's like, she stops, she looks uneasy, she's looking at the baby. Then she's looking at the spiky fence in the foreground. And then she goes up to the spiky fence. She like goes to put the kid down off camera. And it like almost looks like she's trying to impale the child. And then she gets like worked up and she gets upset and whatever. And then the guy comes over and takes the child and is like,
I didn't think of it that way. But because the thing is, once they get to his house, she's very maternal about it. She like is instantly into mother mode. She knows how to take care of him. That's why
I'm like, oh, maybe it was just not blocked very well. But the way it was blocked and shot, it looked to me like she was contemplating like euthanizing this baby.
I didn't see that. And the reason they have to keep the baby for the night is because the cops say the orphanage opens up tomorrow morning. You have to hold off until then and take the baby to the orphanage. And he's like, okay, I got to keep the baby overnight. So then they take care of the baby. The baby will not stop crying. He's worried about the neighbors. They end up sleeping together that night. She has this whole thing about like how she thinks the baby watched them make love, and that makes that baby is now like part of them. Taji's thing is that this baby was assigned to bring them together, finally, once and for all, to commit. She's like, this baby's presence is an omen. It was meant to be. We should keep the baby. It's our baby. We raise it together and we run off and live together. He's like, you're crazy. I'm not taking care of a baby.
I wonder, tinfoil theory, if Furul was pregnant with Golestan's son or daughter, and then Golestan made her get an abortion.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. I like your headcanon there. There's also a premature ejaculation joke.
Missed it.
They are talking about she doesn't want to turn the lights off. He wants the lights off because they want to make love.
Yeah.
He decides to leave a flashlight on for her so they can make love.
Yeah.
And then as the camera pans to the flashlight where they start making love, you hear him say, okay, that's enough for now. And then she goes, you're done so soon? He's like, I mean the lights. Let's turn it off.
Oh.
So there are moments of levity and comedy in this, actually, sprinkled in throughout, which is why it makes me think that this film doesn't take itself necessarily as seriously as some might think.
Yeah. I made a note here just about the orphanage when they go and when he goes the first time and there's the other woman there who wants to adopt a child.
She can't get pregnant.
Yeah, she can't get pregnant.
She keeps having miscarriages.
But at first when she like asks for a kid, she's like, as long as it's a newborn.
Yeah, 2 or 3 days old.
Yeah, the other woman's like, yeah, what else do you want? Like skinny, fat, blonde, brown, like what do you want? Blah, 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 all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then she's like, no, like, I'm not trying to be picky. She's like, oh, you're not trying to be picky. It just has to specifically be 2 or 3 days old. Get out of here.
And she's pretending to be pregnant by putting a bunch of shirts and rags in her stomach to make it seem like she's pregnant.
Which was a weird choice.
Yeah.
Like, for the film. Like, for Golestan.
A lot of weird choices.
And then, and then when she takes the rag out, there's, like, one guy who rushes over and he keeps me like, get up, get up, get up.
That's her husband.
And then, sorry?
It's her husband.
Oh, it is? And then another guy comes over and he's, like, quickly cleaning up all the rags.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that this guy's job? He's like rag cleaner?
Yeah. No, the guy, because what she says, the nurse says, and who are you? He's like, I'm her husband. She's like, get up.
Right. So who's the guy cleaning up the rags?
I don't know.
He's like wearing doctor robes.
Probably just a doctor cleaning up.
Why did he? I don't know.
The whole thing, the big takeaway about this whole like lovemaking scene at the end is she keeps saying like, tell me you love me. Let's have this baby together and take care of it. And he's just like, the neighbors are watching. People are going to see you. How are you going to leave now in the morning? She's like, and he's like, maybe I could tell them I'm your sister. You're my sister. He's like, come on, like we can't say I'm your sister. And a lot of this felt like a lot of this this strain in this relationship felt like, could this be Furu and Golestan together, like struggling through.
I feel like the movie needed to better explain why this was such a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of things the film could explain.
Like, use part of your 2-hour runtime for that.
Because there's a scene later on when he goes to the Ministry of Justice and he just randomly tells, and this is the first time we learn, he tells the minister guy that he's like, can you help sign his papers? I want to keep this child. Do you remember he decides he wants to? And I'm like, when did this turn happen?
Yeah.
I felt like we needed a moment to be like, that emotional change happens within him to be like, but he just kind of goes to the next scene. He's like, I want to fill out papers to be able to adopt this child.
Yeah.
And I felt like I needed a bit of setup. Like I was very shocked by that line. I was like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
These kind of moments where it would just kind of like stitch a little bit of the narrative into a more complete arc.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like the guy's apartment. He's got photos of himself in muscular form. Did you see his entire place is decorated with him as like Mr. It's like Mr. Universe, like Schwarzenegger style, kind of like muscular. And in the morning he works out in those. What are those Iranian weights called?
Yeah, I forget, but I put that down for BTS. He like his workout routine.
Yeah,
is literally with these weights. They're like these giant weighted clubs.
Hold on, someone's gonna get mad at us. Let's find out what.
But it's like a workout routine that's like hundreds of years old, if not like 1,000 years old.
Meal,
maybe.
Yeah, Persian, the oldest strength tool. Historically, meal was used for practicing developing the strength of. It also seems like not a great exercise for your ligaments. Twirling weights around your back like that?
Well, you're supposed to start low and then eventually you get higher, and it's supposed to help with like points of rotation in your limbs. Like you end up with like injuries to your rotator cuff are very common in weightlifting.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a workout like this, and obviously starting with a low weight and working your way up, this should in theory help prevent that.
Okay.
But it's like thousands of years old, right? This traced back to ancient Persia. These clubs were initially devised as training tools for warriors and wrestlers, allowing them to develop their strength and agility necessary for combat. Oh yeah, the other thing is like if you're twirling this around, like then when you have a sword in your hand, like you're twirling that thing around with a lot more speed.
Yeah. There is something I want to know your thoughts. I hope you didn't miss it, but I feel like you missed it. There's a subtle scene in that scene when you're talking about the woman with the rags in her stomach pretending to be pregnant.
Yeah.
That the nurse gets a call. She picks up the phone. It pans to her. We never hear what's happening on the line, but she's smiling.
Yeah. And
we hear the rest of the scene play out in voiceover off camera.
Yeah.
But we stay on her, and I don't get what that means.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, this is something I really need. I looked everywhere. I can't figure out the meaning of this.
Yeah, no,
she's like receiving good news or something because she's smiling, and then she's sort of stroking the phone. It's like almost like a...
or it's like she's talking to a lover or something.
Yeah,
like what?
But the rest of the scene that's playing out that we're here to see is happening off screen.
Yeah.
Off camera. And it's very baffling.
I know. The only other thing I can think of is like maybe she's endeared by the fact that these people are so passionate about children. Like, I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I also have to say one of my final thoughts before we move on is when he gets to the orphanage, not the orphanage scene, that nurse scene, there's a wall of stillborn babies in jars.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, I didn't like that.
I actually audibly said, come on.
Yeah.
Because I think they're real.
Yeah.
There's no prop department in Iran.
No. Those are, especially at this time, like those are definitely real. And it's like, I don't think an orphanage would do that. Like that's such a weird thing to do.
I mean, there's probably a lot of women who come there and have stillborn babies left at the door or something. Or babies died. Like, I don't like.
But like, why would you put it in a jar and then put it on display in an office?
I think the display is for like scientific
I could see
research.
It for scientific
probably.
research, but it wouldn't be in like the registry office. Yeah.
I couldn't stand. I'm like, I don't know if this maybe pre being a parent would have affected me differently.
I'm not a parent, and I thought it was weird too. I was like, I don't like this.
I don't understand.
Like those were living things. And those are babies.
And here's the thing.
They had a life and they died.
That is now the fourth reference in this film to stillborn babies.
Yeah.
So there's a recurring motif of unborn children.
Yeah. And with this whole thing of like wanting to get rid of kids, I feel like this is adding to my theory of Golestan forcing.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that. Him coping in some way?
Just watch, someone's going to be like, yeah, you idiots. It's a well-known fact that she had an abortion.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to Google this.
So I mentioned that, like, I don't understand why the motivational turn happened within him to want to keep the kid.
Yeah.
But the guy, but now he's like, I'm going to keep this kid and I'm going to start this family with Taji. And the minister guy goes, what's your job? And he's like, I'm a taxi driver. He's like, okay, but like, how, you think that easy to keep a kid? Like you have a good job, whatever, but you can't raise a kid by yourself. You can't do this. And he's talked out of it.
Yeah.
Which is the tragedy of it, because
he's not just talked out of it. The guy's like, I will not let you adopt this child.
Yeah.
Like he's straight up like, I don't care what you say. Like you're not taking this child.
Yeah. And so he has to return to his girlfriend now and say, I've taken the baby to the orphanage, which is a truth. He's not lying. He's not saying that. He really has. And she's livid with him. And to me, this becomes like the crux of the story, which this fight between Taji and Hashem.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved everything they said to each other. This was the philosophical banter
that you felt like was missing,
that I'm down for seeing in a film, because they're both sharing their ideologies in a conversation that is diegetic to what's happening. It's natural to the circumstances. Stop looking at whether or not she's pregnant. Who cares?
Golestan adds that he played no role in Farrokhzad's abortion decision because he feared that she would blame him.
Okay, what year was that, though? I mean, was it right after, right before?
1962.
That's crazy. There you go.
Okay, here is a poem. In late 1959 or early 1960, according to Golestan, Farrokhzad became pregnant, which event readers assume lies beyond her exuberant short poem, Golestan, or Red Rose, which reads, Red rose, red, red, red rose. He took me to a rose garden and in the darkness placed a rose in my disheveled hair and finally slept with me on rose petals. O paralyzed doves, O inexperienced sterile trees, O blind windows, beneath my heart and in my inner loins a rose is growing, a rose, red, like a flag at resurrection. Oh, I am pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. According to Golestan, Farrokhzad terminated the pregnancy because she was busy on projects with which a child would interfere. Golestan notes that, after all, she was later unable to raise Hossein Mansouri, the child of lepers whom she adopted in 1962.
Yeah.
Golestan adds that he played no role in Farrokhzad's abortion because he feared that she would blame him, whatever decision was taken, if things did not work out in a joint decision.
Yeah. Just a few more thoughts before we go behind the scenes.
Okay.
It's funny that she's like really upset that he gave the baby away. And he's like, but she had watched us. We had become three. Because the baby had watched them make love.
Yeah.
And he's like annoyed. He's like, should I take care of everyone who watches us make love?
How many people are watching them make love?
Exactly.
Clearly not his neighbors. His blinds are constantly shut.
And I do enjoy how much she stands up to him. She's like, take me to the child that you dropped at the orphanage. She's like, I'll pay the fare. She's like forcing him to be his taxi driver now. Yeah. And he's like, you're the one who's making me pay. And she's like, I'm paying the price for your cowardice.
Yeah.
Good scene. The lines of dialogue between them in the fight, I really liked.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's where we kind of end up is like any comments on the last scene when we were with the orphanage? Like we did sort of talk about how it becomes like a documentary.
Yeah, just that it definitely felt a lot like House is Black. I do think that scene was like a little long.
It's 8 minutes. Very long.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in general, like every single scene in this movie is too long.
I felt really heartbroken. Like I found that scene really emotional and hard to watch because I knew some of the babies were happy. Some of them were hyper. Some of them were like sick.
Yeah. As soon as it went into like the stuff with injecting the kids with syringes, I was like,
there's like a clear shot of them putting a needle in the child's neck.
Yeah.
Which is not scripted.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even like that was a real moment. Like that's the documentary footage.
Yeah. Which to me it's kind of like, I think there's value in showing that to people in Iran, like that this is what was happening when people were abandoning their children. But I think that it would have served better if that footage was reused as like an 8-minute like documentary type thing, similar to House is Black. Like I think that's what should have happened to that footage.
He was interested. Like he was interested in showing it, and he wanted it for his film, which is again goes to the speak about he had autonomy over the film.
Or he was jealous of Furu.
And then my last note was, in the end, he didn't take the child, and that ruins his relationship with the woman he loves. But he didn't take the child, not because he didn't want to, because he was convinced he's not capable of taking care of it.
And they wouldn't let him. Which, they wouldn't let Ebrahim be with Furu.
Well, also, I mean, like, he could have just taken the guy didn't force him to take it to the orphan. Like, he could have just then left with her.
Oh, I thought they took the child from him.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh no, maybe you're right. Maybe they did force him.
He said I dropped him off. I dropped her off at the orphanage.
Yeah, you might be right.
But yeah, that's it. Those are my main thoughts. Anything else?
No, I think we covered my main thoughts as well.
Behind the scenes and trivia. It was the first Iranian film to use direct sound, whatever that means.
Oh, like on set.
Audio captured on
Yeah,
set.
that makes sense. I realized that too when we were watching it. I was like, oh, this is like not ADR'd audio.
Yeah.
Is that true though, or does...
No, there might be some scenes of ADR.
No, but I mean, if you look at House is Black, does House is Black not have scenes that are not ADR?
Yeah, I think that if it's some critic had written this in a review right at a festival.
One thing that I've noticed when I've been reading about the behind the scenes of this film, and also when we were reading the behind the scenes about sorry, I didn't mean House of Black, I meant Night of the Hunchback, is that Night of the Hunchback consistently has the same release date. Okay?
Yeah.
And there's more sources, especially Iranian sources, that mention Night of the Hunchback was the first feature-length film that like essentially kicked off or sparked the Iranian New Wave movement.
Yeah.
So it was House is Black, Furu's short, and then Night of the Hunchback, and then this. There's a couple places that place this movie, Brick and Mirror, releasing in the same year as Night of the Hunchback. But most of the sources that I found place this in either 1965 or 1966, which places it after. And I could have sworn that there were scenes in Night of the Hunchback that also had like captured audio on set, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But that is one thing to keep in mind to our listeners, is that there are sources out there that will place this movie as having come out before Night of the Hunchback.
Yeah.
But continue.
The film is considered the spark of the emergence of Iranian New Wave.
See, there's another one that I'm like...
Up there along with Mir Jui's The Cow and Qafari's Night of the Hunchback. He is among the social realist thinkers in this category. So The Cow would be the official fire that started, but things like Night of the Hunchback and this would be the spark.
Yeah. If you look at Furu's House is Black as like... It's like if that's the match, and it almost lights two sparks, because Night of the Hunchback inspires things like Downpour, right?
Yeah.
But then this movie inspires films more like The Cow and the Deer.
Yeah.
Right? Like it almost goes into two different directions, where one is more like French New Wave and the other one's more like Italian neorealism.
These films of this category, specifically this one, but these social realist directors and this film were critically challenging of the state, which caused a tense relationship between the government and the filmmaker. So there's a bit of a double-edged sword because the festival successes of these films meant international profile for the country, but it was essentially dissident cinema, critical of contemporary social conditions. For reasons like this, Golestan had to rent a movie house himself just to screen Brick and Mirror because no commercial exhibitor would pick it up.
That's wild.
This is obviously a production of the Golestan Film Workshop, which we had gone over in more detail in the House is Black episode. So if you want to hear more detail about it, but loosely, Ebrahim Golestan started his own film workshop, initially working for NIOC, the National Iranian Oil Company. At the time, he was preparing news reports and photos and 16mm footage for dissemination for the foreign press. And he started making these like educational, so not educational in the way Kiarostami did, but like informative videos about the oil company.
Almost.
Yeah. And as an extension of that, he started this film workshop, which at first was funded by the NIOC.
Yeah.
Because they paid for his film equipment, all of his equipment, studio equipment.
Yeah.
And then he had to make these films for them to pay off his debt for the film equipment. So once he had fully paid off his debt, he was free to make his own movies, and thus he made this film, and it was the first ever independent nonfiction studio film made in Iran. On top of that, the Golestan Film Workshop had also dubbed over 600 technical and educational films in Farsi. So they'd find other films internationally and dub them, and this was the studio house that did it.
That's cool.
Because we haven't done a Golestan film yet, I'll just mention that he was born in Shiraz in 1922. He was drawn to cinema from childhood as his uncle took him to the movies twice a week, starting at 7 years old. So Faran, that's 1929 Iranian cinema. He would go twice a week.
That's wild.
Think of it. Like what the state of Iranian cinema was like in 1929. We haven't even gone that far back yet in our podcast.
I mean, it could have also been like, you know, those like Nickelodeons or whatever, where it's like at the side of the road, it's like a short film, or it's like in a small room. you pay like a small fare and then you like
Right, yeah,
stick your
might have
face
been.
into like
or
a
it might
little
have been
hole.
Chaplin movies or something.
Could have also been Chaplin. Like I know that Iran had, depending on your budget range, they had various options. Even in the 50s and 60s, like Nickelodeons were still a thing in Iran.
Yeah. The GFW, Golestan Film Workshop, comprised of self-sufficient and creative but dedicated film technicians and aficionados, many of whom lacked any prior cinema experience, but would become prominent in cinema literature and journalism. Their work would lead to the creation of a workshop house style, namely poetic realism, which is what these films are.
Oh, that's interesting.
To learn more on this, you can read Hamid Nafisi's A Social History of Iranian Cinema, which I always reference on our podcast. I just want to give him a shout out because this is where a lot of the research was done.
Yeah.
Nafisi himself actually interviewed Golestan for a lot of these quotes. So these are directly from Golestan through Nafisi's interviews.
Oh, cool.
He enjoyed a rather central leadership role at GFW, often playing the role of director, writer, editor, cameraman, and narrator in his films. He felt films had to be personal, and films can only be that way if one person's idea predominates. A film can only be personal if it's like one central voice.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
Due to this overarching command, his scripts were often half completed and he made lots of room for improvisation while shooting. He actually never completed a script before shooting. He wrote
that feels like the opposite of what you just said.
No, he wouldn't worry about the script, but he was in charge of everything else.
I know, but like the script is the.
I know. This is just. I mean, listen. I can't expect him to.
I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking his philosophy.
He wrote the dialogue for Brick and Mirror a day or two before shooting, but then would like use them as loose outlines.
Right.
The film employs a deliberate claustrophobic spatiality as social criticism, just like they both did in The House is Black, which Furu had said was a portrayal, was a quote, a portrayal of any closed and claustrophobic society. So both these films employ this like very tight claustrophobic sort of space. You can't really, it doesn't feel open and wide like both films. And that's deliberate by both these filmmakers. Okay. After this film, his first feature, and the tragic death of Furugh Farrokhzad, Golestan closed the GFW and left the country in 1967. But he returned in 1970 to film his second and last feature film, The Secrets of the Treasure of the Geni Valley. To pay for the film, however, he had to sell his studio with all of its equipment. The buyer, the National Iranian Radio and Television, like their CBC, he bought it for 8 million tomans, which he had received for the studio property, which he said, quote, was less than the price of a Mitchell camera. With the completion of his second film, he left his family in Iran in 1975 for what turned out to be a permanent exile in Britain. When Hamid Nafisi asked him in an interview about how attached he was to the past, to diary writing, and to heritage, he had responded, "No, I do not keep the past. I do not keep my own handwritten manuscripts or Furukh's writing. There's no reason. I never write a diary. I am against heritage. It's comical to leave something behind." Which Nafisi says is an ironic statement from someone who has made films about Iranian national heritage.
Yeah.
That's it for behind the scenes and trivia.
That's cool. I want to watch his other film.
Yeah, it's in color. I saw that. I downloaded it.
Do you know who plays the lead?
Yeah, it's Pavi Syed.
Yeah. I only have one other thing for behind the scenes and trivia.
Oh, yeah.
In the third vignette of the film, when they're at the cabaret, did you notice one of the bottles on the table in the foreground, what it was?
I did. I forgot now. Was it a Crown Royal or something?
No, there was a Canada Dry.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. I was like, hey!
Yeah. Critical reactions. Audiences and critics poorly received the film, citing its pretentiousness. However, after restoration, this once forgotten film gained a second life and proper recognition amongst cinephiles.
I bet you Afra loves this movie.
For sure. Golestan said that Brick and Mirror screened in Tehran for 3 weeks, but not in other cities, and provided 2 anecdotes about its public reception. Outside the movie house where the film was being shown, he one day overheard a spectator proclaim that his time and money had been wasted. Another spectator took issue with this comment, and their argument escalated into a fist fight. An amused Golestan stood by and watched. When he attended the film's last scheduled screening, a film critic there told him that he had seen the film 50 times.
Oh my God.
Yet this did not prevent this critic from panning the film in his review a week later as the stupidest film he had ever seen. Golestan told the critic that he'd found it even stupider to spend all that money and time watching a stupid film. These anecdotes exemplify the divided sentiments the film aroused in its spectators. And lastly, I'll just do a modern review. Kathleen Sachs of the Chicago Reader gave it a good review, saying, Brick and Mirror offers a prescient glimpse of pre-revolutionary Iran with all its seemingly modern zeal, beneath which festers troubles portending future conflict. Deeper analysis. Go ahead, Farhan. I've been talking quite a lot.
The central theme of this film is a quote from Sadi, which is, if you're incapable of feeling empathy for others, you can't be known as a human. Essentially, it's inhumane to not feel empathy towards others. Or if you have the ability to help someone, you have a responsibility to do it.
Which is what the news reporter sort of says at the end.
Yeah, he's directly quoting Sadi.
I see.
Yeah.
The title, I'll just jump off that, is a reference to Sadi too, who is a 13th century Persian poet. Just for all you trivia buffs out.
Yeah, what's the reference?
What an old man sees in a clay brick, youth will see in a mirror. Now that is worth its own deeper analysis. That's a reference, obviously, but it's talking about the generational divide. What do you think that means? Let's talk about that out loud.
Say it one more time.
What an old man sees in a clay brick, the youth will see in a mirror. So, like, I don't know, something about how in a clay brick, the old will see reflections of themselves,
maybe
their past.
Yeah.
If an old man looks at a brick,
there's value in that brick.
Yeah.
That it's been formed through time and pressure, and it serves a key role in providing shelter, providing necessary infrastructure.
It also feels like it has something about Iranians and generations and what we're leaving for the future, what we're leaving behind. During a post-screening of the film, Golestan had said, humans are alone and responsible for their own fate, which was a response to a question a student had asked in the film about how Taji thinks that their baby had been brought to them together to keep them together. And Golestan and Hashem disagree. Because they're like, no, there's no fate here bringing us together. We're responsible for our own decisions.
Yeah, I mentioned that too. That a man alone, a woman alone, and a child alone, when they meet, like there's an opportunity there for them to all be brought together.
Yeah.
Then as soon as the child is taken away again, it kind of crumbles.
There's also a lot to be said about how this is a very similar film to Night of the Hunchback, if you think about it.
Yeah.
A group of friends have this dead body, the corpse they don't know where to put.
Yeah.
And the inverse of that is these two lovers have this newborn baby. It's like birth and death.
Yeah.
And traveling from place to place, trying to find a way to get rid of this
the two sparks of the movement.
Yeah.
One's of life and one's of death. And one is comedic and the other one is...
Yeah, the death is comedic and this is like serious.
Yeah.
I also found it interesting that, you know what, do you remember what he does to try to drown out the crying baby? The sound when they're in the apartment?
No.
Turns on the radio and all of a sudden Quran is playing. Some of the morning, the prayers are being played.
Yeah.
So why is this Islamic prayer drowning out the cries of a child?
I also, again, we're looking at this with a contemporary lens, whereas back then Islam was going through like a renaissance of sorts in Iran, where people were placing value on the Quran again.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is actually supposed to be like, oh, if they just listen to the radio, it'll give them the solutions to their problems.
Yeah.
Whereas now with a contemporary lens, we're like, oh, it's ironic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The argument scenes, especially the most heated one when they're walking throughout the city and then they get in the car, is shot at a much faster frame rate. Or sorry, slower frame rate.
Yeah.
So the playback is faster. So instead of 24 frames per second, I think it was 18 frames per second. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I was like, this might actually be intentional for it to feel like intense and quick and jarring. You know what I mean?
The Nafisi book points that shot out specifically as like a standout scene that he really liked. Yeah. Saying that it was the one moment that's specifically handheld camera footage. Whereas everything else might have been like set cameras.
It was also handheld.
And it's the DP kind of like steadily backing up with his handheld camera. So that might have been...
It's handheld and it's slower frame rate. So it plays back faster.
And it's also before the Steadicam, obviously. So it's like whatever you're just experiencing is just happening when the guy's watching.
It's like very intense. It's very... Yeah. And that handheldness is accentuated by that slower frame rate. Like you really feel it.
Yeah. I just wanted to pull out one more Nafisi quote for deeper analysis. He says, because this is what I draw it upon from right now. He goes, the baby in the car, like the corpse in Night of the Hunchback, becomes a vehicle that allows Golestan to explore the modern city of Tehran. From a cafe to city streets to a Ministry of Justice building to a coppersmith bazaar and a modern orphanage. And allows Golestan to comment on the fears and the place's various inhabitants. So from conversations to radio stations, footsteps, create this city symphony. Which I actually really liked about it. You get a glimpse of like that era of Tehran really nicely.
Yeah.
And this idea with like the neighborhoods and the prying eyes, like he's constantly worried about who's watching him, which could talk about this idea of like surveillance state, the Savak and people keeping eyes. And the opening radio station is also talking about like a dark city that you can't tell hunter from prey. That very first thing, which is spoken by Golestan himself.
Yeah,
it's setting the mood for the entire film. It's like this era of suffocation, and you don't know who to trust. It's kind of this dark noir aesthetic that it's setting, and ultimately this idea of like she wants to be with him and keep the baby. He loves her but can't commit. It could also be a political metaphor. Like, I mean, maybe to some degree, it could be about relationship people in government, especially at the time, and also a very real personal relationship between him and Furu.
In that same opening scene when he's like driving and he's listening to the radio's talking about gold standard nuts, gold standard spices. Like it's advertising all these different gold standard things that you can buy, right? Very capitalist.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, when he's listening to the broadcast on TV, it talks about the only true gold standard is having the ability to help someone and then to actually help them.
Oh, right.
A nice bookend to the movie where in the first scene, it's talking about these gold standard things as this like capitalist pursuit. And then the ending is more about, I guess, like humanism in a way. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to also mention is that when he sees that broadcast at the end of the film, there's two things about it I wanted to bring up and I want to get your thoughts on it. One of them is like, it very much feels like Deus Ex Machina in a lot of ways, where it's like,
how so?
Because it doesn't solve the A plot of the baby. You know what I mean? Because the baby's already gone at this point.
Yeah.
But it kind of solves the B plot in like his character growth, we assume, the way that it ends.
Yeah.
It's like the narrator is coming down literally from a machine to tell the main character, hey, you need to get your shit together. This is how you should be living your life.
Yeah.
Which if you read, for example, the Iliad, the whole, like the Iliad in a lot of places is narrated by Greek gods.
Yeah.
Especially because the Iliad was written to be performed as a play. And the narrators were meant to be the gods. And then at the very end of the play, the solution to the Trojan War is that Athena comes, I think it's Athena, right? Athena comes down, like descends onto the stage in a chariot, which is like what the machine is that quote unquote God from a machine or Deus Ex.
I thought Athena, it was from ropes and pulleys.
It is. It's ropes and pulleys descends the chariot.
I see. Yeah.
And Athena comes onto the battlefield and like tells everyone like, hey, you guys all need to do better and like be better people and blah, 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 blah. And then the war ends.
Yeah.
It felt very much like that, but from a TV instead of rope and pulley.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you think, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I like it from that idea of like the narrator and it's the voice of the creator of this world coming and speaking to them. Yeah. I just don't know if it solved anything. I don't think he's different because he heard that. It's almost felt like a message directly to the audience rather than the character. Because like, it's not solving any of the problems he was facing during the film. Whereas Deus Ex Machina is supposed to be like, and with a single hand waving, we've solved the plot of the film. Where it's like the plot hasn't changed much, really.
Do you think that he grows as a person in that scene?
I think it's vague. I think it's deliberately so, like vague.
Interesting. Okay. My other deeper analysis thing for that same scene, I want to know your thoughts. I don't really have much on it, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Do you think there is a thematic reason why the TV announcer is the same person as the like civic duty guy, like the guy in the town or in the city hall who was like, no, you can't take this baby.
The TV reporter?
Yeah. It's the same actor.
It is?
Yeah.
Sure?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice.
He has the same birthmark here too.
Okay, yeah. I noticed the birthmark on the guy when he's in the office.
Yeah, he has a birthmark on the TV too.
Okay. That's weird.
Can you think of like thematically why they would do that?
No.
Yeah, it's Golestan's voice, but it's the same actor from the town hall. If you have theories, let us know.
Yeah, I don't know. Damn, that's poetry. I want to do at least two because there's a few I liked quite a lot. So why don't you go first with your one or two? If you have it, then if you have one that I said, I'll cross it off.
I have one that was just kind of an interesting not turn of phrase, but just like an interesting thought that one of the characters had that I wrote down. And then the other one was my actual real favorite quote.
Go with your turn of phrase.
There's a scene where this doctor who's recently been attacked is with the cops, and he's talking about how he was assaulted, and the police officer responds to him when he's on his way out. He's like, if you're going to be working late shifts and you're walking home, you should keep a gun on you. Oh, but I'm a doctor. Like, I don't want a gun, whatever. He's like, no, you should keep a gun. And then he says, the outcome of a gun is something not found in any medication.
Oh, yeah, I see.
I was like, oh, that's interesting. Especially given that this is like a precursor to the Iranian Revolution in a lot of ways. That was the sentiment that was used to justify the people having guns and owning guns.
Mm-hmm.
Was that it was the medication for the country.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
There's a scene where they have an argument, where the boyfriend and girlfriend have an argument in the bedroom, and he's like trying to control her. And this is like after, I presume, hours of him telling her what to do and what not to do. Mm-hmm. And the baby keeps crying, and he's trying to get the baby to stop crying. And then finally, she turns to the child, who's a girl, and she says, yell. Keep yelling. If you've not yet grown up and become a coward, continue to yell. I too should have been yelling.
I had that one too.
Did?
It says shout, little one. Keep shouting.
Yeah, shouting is probably a better.
Yeah. That's one of mine. So definitely keep it in there.
Okay.
I have two. One slightly longer, which you hate, but I just have to do it. Don't say something you'll regret tomorrow, he says to her. She goes, again tomorrow, you have another tomorrow in your reserve. Why should your tomorrow be any different from your today? The sun goes up and that's how you count your days. How do you know this child wasn't your tomorrow? And there's a little addendum to that. She says to him, your tomorrows are like lottery tickets. And he's like, I already told you I have bad luck. And she goes, it's not your luck that's bad. It's your tickets that are bad.
فردا براش مثل چهارشنبه است برای اونایی که بلیت بخت آزمایی میخرن. مونتا برای اونا هفته یه بار چهارشنبه میاد. قرعه میکشن. گاهی هم میزنه بعضیا میبرن. اما چهارشنبه ای تو، قرعه تو، بلیتای تو.
بله دیگه گفتم خودم. وقت ما بده.
نه عزیز من بلیتات بده.
Which I like that a lot. And then just one little line, you don't even have to put the quote in, but at one point she goes, you cheated me by returning that child. And he's like, oh, it's not cheating when you sleep with other men? She goes, I'd be cheating on myself if I slept another night with you.
نارو زدی.
با دیگرون میری بیرون اسمش نمیذاری نارو زدن؟
راستشو بخوای حالا دیگه بیرون رفتن با تو نارو زدن به خودم میشه.
Dang.
Got him.
Favorite performance? Go ahead, Farhan.
Taji Ahmadi. I thought her performance in the car alone, like in that final scene, the one that you just quoted, was amazing. Yeah, like that performance alone, I was like, yo, this give her all the awards.
Same.
Yeah. I want to give a special shout out to the cabaret performer with the eyebrows. He's like, bobbing his head back and forth and like wiggling his eyebrows.
Festival of Cons. There's obviously a lot we've gone over. My main was I just think the improvisational elements is actually cause for weakness in this film.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm with that. I have 3 that we didn't cover. One of them was just like, sometimes the baby is obviously replaced with a styrofoam baby, which is
I never noticed.
Really? The first time he like takes the kid out of the car, it like cuts to the child and it's like clearly a child. And then when he goes to pick it up and start yelling, it's like 3 times the size of the child.
I didn't
and it weighs like nothing, and he's just sprinting around holding this thing.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It did not look good. They shot this film with anamorphic lenses. For those who don't know, they're not like a regular camera lens. Like it's not spherical. It's not all the way around. It's actually more of like a squished oval, and it squishes the image. And then when you watch the image back later, you have a lens in the opposite direction that stretches it back out. And the reason you do this is you end up with a much wider screen. Yeah. The problem is that I suspect some of the crew on the film were kind of new to this because it wasn't used that much in Iran at the time. So there's a lot of scenes in the movie where that lens is not on properly, and so people's faces are like super distorted.
Yeah.
But that is quite a bit of a nitpick. This one is kind of one of those things that like aged kind of poorly. The courthouse guy uses a term for people with mental disabilities that is very outdated, which is kind of the equivalent of like the R word in Persian.
Yeah.
And that just didn't age very well.
Yeah.
That's it. I have a special shout out to whoever made my subtitles. There's parts in the subtitles where, like, in parenthesis, it's describing things on screen.
I had that version too.
You did? Where, like, there's a scene where it's like they're talking about the child, and then in parenthesis, it's like, the baby is a girl. And it's like, yeah, we can see. Like, he like,
does that also for
giving
the
child a shower, and we can see.
Yeah. There was a few things like there's something, whatever, yeah.
But I was like, whoever wrote these subtitles, I don't know if they understand how subtitles work.
Yeah. Double feature lineup. I got 3. I'll just rapid fire them for different reasons.
Yeah.
It kept making me think of Scorsese's After Hours again, because After Hours takes place in one night where he's rushing around from place to place. And they're all
I haven't seen it yet. I just bought it.
Oh, did you? That's awesome. Yeah. Coffee and Cigarettes, black and white movie by Jim Jarmusch, which just scenes a bunch of people. It's a black and white movie. It's just a bunch of largely celebrities sitting and having coffee and having improvised conversations together. Coffee and Cigarettes. And Bicycle Thieves was the one that shout out Francisco. I asked him for an opinion on one because I was like, I'm only like so on these. And I gave him like a brief synopsis of what happens in the film. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of like Bicycle Thieves. I'm like, I'll take that one.
Yeah, that's solid. I haven't seen either of those, but I know, like, from what I've heard about the plots of these films, I feel like those are all pretty apt. Couldn't think of any that are like direct films that I would pair with this.
Batman Forever.
Batman Begins, actually. We haven't made a Batman Begins reference in a while. I remember what my corollary was. And it's actually a video game. And I'm standing by this. Death Stranding was what I could think of to pair this with. Yeah. I couldn't think of a movie to pair this with. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with Death Stranding.
Right.
Because it's like about this guy who mysteriously finds his baby and he has to like deliver it. And he's wandering around trying to figure out what to do.
I wonder if he was influenced by Death Stranding when he made the film.
Probably was. I assume. That's the closest I can come up with. Either that or there's an episode of Smallville, which is a terrible episode. And it's all about how Lana and Clark, who are no longer together, they have like fraught previous relationship. They find a baby and they have to figure out what to do with it together.
So your double feature lineup is to come watch this movie Brick and Mirror. Then the entire audience gets together and plays an hour of Death Stranding together, and then finishes the night off with an episode of Smallville.
With probably the worst episode of Smallville ever.
All right. Excellent, Farhan.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Can this be a modern Hollywood remake? I'll say no. I think it's sort of trapped in the amber of time due to the way it captures a time and place in Iran that makes it the essence of the film. It's a snapshot of a period, and doing any kind of modern adaptation, whether it's done by an Iranian filmmaker or not, kind of loses a lot of the point of what this film is dealing with. This is an existential film talking about the state of Iran at the time. All of these characters are bemusing about what's going on during the time this film was going on. It would be futile, and I think would lose a lot of its essence to remake this film.
I disagree. I think you could remake this film as a short and still hit a lot of the same beats. I think the dialogue would be different and the problems that people are talking about are different. But I think that you could still recreate this film in a lot of ways. What I would be more interested to see is these different vignettes that we talked about. I would love to see someone take one of these vignettes in the film and develop something further on just one of those. Specifically, the one where he's walking around the abandoned complex with the baby, and he's like going from room to room, and in one room he finds this guy who is like the friend of the old lady's child, and he was like forgotten by society. Then he finds this woman who is is she with a child too?
No, I don't know. I don't think so.
I remember. He finds this room with a woman who is abandoned by her husband. Like, I think that there's an interesting film to see that is this guy who finds this baby and he's going around from room to room to room, finding personifications of different problems in himself or in society as he goes through it. And it's like kind of narrated by this oracle-like figure when he enters the building.
Yeah.
That would be a really interesting movie. I want to see that.
Good job, Farhan. You can do that Hollywood remake. I'll let you direct it. Okay, final thoughts and grades.
What's your grade?
I waver between a B- and a B. I actually think as we discussed this a little bit more, I started liking it a little bit more. And if you were to lean into the angle that maybe some of this is a commentary on people who are supposed bourgeois elitists, then those scenes play out a little bit more deliberately, intentionally self-indulgent. There is some room to think there's some satire going on here. And I also think it's an interesting look into the time and place of Iran, especially the roles of men and women. And there's obviously the motif of like stillborn babies and talking about generations. I think this film is a very thoughtful film. I think it's a very important film. I think it's a complicated film. I cannot get past the fact that it is frustrating. It is certainly not an A, but I think a C would be too low in my estimation of my taste. So I'm wavering between B- and B.
I would give this a C++.
I figured.
I can't give this a B, just like looking at the other movies I've given a B to, and it like this confidently to me feels slightly below a lot of those other films. I think that in concept, it's a great film. I think it's shot individually, the shots are beautiful, but when you stitch the shots together, it's just very clunky.
Yeah.
And I understand when the movie came out and its place in the Iranian pantheon, and for that, I give it a lot of respect and props. But still, watching it now, 2025, I've got to give it a C++. I suspect if you were to recut this movie and get it down from 2 hours, 10 minutes, even down to like 50 minutes, and fix some of these problems that I have with like the 180 rule, like if you flip some of the shots of the old lady, it would probably solve it, like things like that. It would probably be confidently in the B territory, but as is, C++. Which means that the Cinema Rex show average score for Brick and Mirror is B-.
Ebrahim Golestan was a leading figure in the initial pre-revolutionary Iranian New Wave, as well as a respected literary figure. His debut feature, Brick and Mirror, merges neo-realist qualities with a visual sensibility that evokes German expressionism. One can observe influences from Italian neorealism, the French New Wave like Godard, and classic Hollywood, primarily Orson Welles. Armed with just a title, a team of 5 or so people, and an unfinished script, the director began filming this project, much of which was improvised. Remarkably, few films so vividly capture Tehran and Iranian society as it existed at the time Brick and Mirror was made. Beyond presenting extraordinary glimpses of physical spaces, the film symbolically articulates the profound existential anxieties of a society adrift, grappling with its incomplete understanding of a rapidly changing world. Brick and Mirror is not a perfect film, but that's precisely what makes it alive. The director had complete control over the film, and this freedom allowed him to create a unique work filled with personal experiences. It's not a film of precise scripts and storyboards. It's a living organism that cannot be summed up in a single line. It's not a bold statement with an exclamation mark at the end. Rather, it's a multitude of question marks and endless searches for answers. The film invites reflection on contemplation, leaving viewers with lingering thoughts and interpretations. Farhan, thank you very much for engaging in a conversation with me about Brick and Mirror.
Kaveh, thank you for coming over.
You know how I feel about you.
Unfortunately.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe and spread the word about Cinerex Podcast.
Comment,
because
share.
we can always use new listeners.
Leave a review.
And to everyone else, Be'omid Didar.
Bye. Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.